Chapter 31 of the White Company. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Clive Catterall. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 31. How 5 men held the keep of Villefranche. Under the guidance of the French squire, the party passed down 2 narrow corridors. The first was empty, but at the head of the second stood a peasant sentry, who started off at the sight of them, yelling loudly to his comrades. "Stop him, or we are undone!" cried Du Guesclin, and had started to run when Aylward's great war bow twanged like a harp string, and the man fell forward upon his face, with twitching limbs and clutching fingers. Within 5 paces of where he lay, a narrow and little used door led out into the bailey. From beyond it came such a babel of hooting and screaming, horrible oaths, and yet more horrible laughter, that the stoutest heart might have shrunk from casting down the frail barrier which faced them. "Make straight for the keep," said Du Guesclin in a sharp, stern whisper. "2 archers in front, the lady in the centre, a squire on either side, while we 3 knights shall bide behind and beat back those who press upon us. So, now open the door, and God have us in his holy keeping." For a few moments it seemed that their object would be attained without danger, so swift and so silent had been their movements. They were half way across the bailey ere the frantic, howling peasants made a movement to stop them. The few who threw themselves in their way were overpowered or brushed aside, while the pursuers were beaten back by the ready weapons of the 3 cavaliers. Unscathed, they fought their way to the door of the keep, and faced round upon the swarming mob, while the squire thrust the great key into the lock. "My God!" he cried, "it is the wrong key." "The wrong key? Dolt, fool that I am! This is the key of the castle gate. The other opens the keep. I must back for it." He turned, with some wild intention of retracing his steps, but at the instant a great jagged rock, hurled by a brawny peasant, struck him full upon the ear, and he dropped senseless to the ground. "This is key enough for me," quoth Hordle John, picking up the huge stone and hurling it against the door with all the strength of his enormous body. The lock shivered, the wood smashed, the stone flew into 5 pieces, but the iron clamps still held the door in its position. Bending down, he thrust his great fingers under it, and with a heave raised the whole mass of wood and iron from its hinges. For a moment it tottered and swayed, and then, falling outward, buried him in its ruin, while his comrades rushed into the dark archway which led to safety. "Up the steps, Tiphaine!" cried Du Guesclin. "Now, round, friends, and beat them back." The mob of peasants had surged in upon their heels, but the 2 trustiest blades in Europe gleamed upon that narrow stair, and 4 of their number dropped upon the threshold. The others gave back, and gathered in a half circle round the open door, gnashing their teeth and shaking their clenched hands at the defenders. The body of the French squire had been dragged out by them and hacked to pieces. 3 or 4 others had pulled John from under the door, when he suddenly bounded to his feet, and clutching one in either hand, dashed them together with such force that they fell senseless across each other upon the ground. With a kick and a blow he freed himself from 2 others who clung to him, and in a moment he was within the portal with his comrades. Yet their position was a desperate one. The peasants from far and near had been assembled for this deed of vengeance, and not less than 6,000 were within or around the walls of the chateau of Villefranche. Ill armed and half starved, they were still desperate men, to whom danger had lost all fears. For what was death that they should shun it to cling to such a life as theirs? The castle was theirs, and the roaring flames were spurting through the windows and flickering high above the turrets on 2 sides of the quadrangle. From either side they were sweeping down from room to room, and from bastion to bastion in the direction of the keep. Faced by an army and girt in by fire were 6 men and 1 woman, But some of them were men so trained to danger and so wise in war that even now the combat was less unequal than it seemed. Courage and resource were penned in by desperation and numbers, while the great yellow sheets of flame threw their lurid glare over the scene of death. "There is but space for two upon a step to give free play to our sword arms," said Du Guesclin. "Do you stand with me, Nigel, upon the lowest. France and England will fight together this night. Sir Otto, I pray you to stand behind us with this young squire. The archers may go higher yet and shoot over our heads. I would that we had our harness, Nigel. Often have I heard my dear Sir John Chandos say that a knight should never, even when a guest, be parted from it. Yet it will be more honor to us if we come well out of it. We have a vantage, since we see them against the light, and they can scarce see us. It seems to me that they muster for an onslaught." "If we can but keep them in play," said the Bohemian, "it is likely that these flames may bring us succor if there be any true men in the country." "Bethink you, my fair lord," said Alleyne to Sir Nigel, "that we have never injured these men, nor have we cause of quarrel against them. Would it not be well, if but for the lady's sake, to speak them fair, and see if we may not come to honourable terms with them?" "Oh, not so, by St. Paul!" cried Sir Nigel. "It does not accord with mine honor, nor shall it ever be said that I, a knight of England, was ready to hold parley with men who have slain a fair lady and a holy priest." "As well hold parley with a pack of ravening wolves," said the French captain. "Ha! Notre Dame du Guesclin! St. Ives! St. Ives!" As he thundered forth his war cry, the Jacks who had been gathering before the black arch of the gateway rushed in madly in a desperate effort to carry the staircase. Their leaders were a small dark man, dark in the face, with his beard done up in two plaits, and another larger man, very bowed in the shoulders, with a huge club studded with sharp nails in his hand. The first had not taken 3 steps ere an arrow from Aylward's bow struck him full in the chest, and he fell coughing and spluttering across the threshold. The other rushed onwards, and breaking between Du Guesclin and Sir Nigel, he dashed out the brains of the Bohemian with a single blow of his clumsy weapon. With 3 swords through him he still struggled on, and had almost won his way through them ere he fell dead upon the stair. Close at his heels came 100 furious peasants, who flung themselves again and again against the 5 swords which confronted them. It was cut and parry and stab as quick as eye could see or hand act. The door was piled with bodies, and the stone floor slippery with blood. The deep shout of Du Guesclin, the hard hissing breath of the pressing multitude, the clatter of steel, the thud of falling bodies, and the screams of the stricken, made up such a medley as came often in after years to break upon Alleyne's sleep. Slowly and sullenly at last the throng drew off, with many a fierce backward glance, while 11 of their number lay huddled in front of the stair which they had failed to win. "The dogs have had enough," said Du Guesclin. "By St. Paul, there appear to be some very worthy and valiant persons among them," observed Sir Nigel. "They are men from whom, had they been of better birth, much honor and advancement might be gained. Even as it is a great pleasure to have seen them. But what is this that they are bringing forward?" "It is as I feared," growled Du Guesclin. "They will burn us out, since they cannot win their way past us. Shoot straight and hard, archers, for by St. Ives! our good swords are of little use to us." As he spoke a dozen men rushed forward, each screening himself behind a huge fardel of brushwood. Hurling their burdens in one vast heap within the portal, they threw burning torches upon the top of it. The wood had been soaked in oil, for in an instant it was ablaze, and a long hissing yellow flame licked over the heads of the defenders and drove them further up to the first floor of the keep. They had scarce reached it, however, ere they found that the wooden joists and planks of the flooring were already on fire. Dry and worm eaten, a spark upon them became a smoulder, and a smoulder a blaze. A choking smoke filled the air, and the 5 could scarce grope their way to the staircase which led up to the very summit of the square tower. Strange was the scene which met their eyes from this eminence. Beneath them On every side stretched the long sweep of peaceful country, rolling plain and tangled wood, all softened and mellowed in the silver moonshine. No light nor movement, nor any sign of human aid could be seen, but far away the hoarse clangor of a heavy bell rose and fell upon the wintry air. Beneath and around them blazed the huge fire, roaring and crackling on every side of the bailey, and even as they looked the two corner turrets fell in with a deafening crash, and the whole castle was but a shapeless mass, spouting flames and smoke from every window and embrasure. The great black tower upon which they stood rose like a last island of refuge amid this sea of fire, but the ominous crackling and roaring below showed that it would not be long ere it was engulfed also in the common ruin. At their very feet was the square courtyard, crowded with the howling and dancing peasants, their fierce faces upturned, their clenched hands waving, all drunk with bloodshed and with vengeance. A yell of execration and a scream of hideous laughter burst out from the vast throng as they saw the faces of the last survivors of their enemies peering down at them from the height of the keep. They still piled the brushwood round the base of the tower, and gambolled hand in hand around the blaze, screaming out the doggerel lines which had long been the watchword of the Jacquerie: "Cessez, cessez, gendarmes et piétons, de piller et manger le bonhomme, qui de longtemps Jacques Bonhomme se nomme." Their thin, shrill voices rose high above the roar of the flames and the crash of the masonry, like the yelping of a pack of wolves who see their quarry before them and know that they have well nigh run him down. "By my hilt," said Aylward to John, "it is in my mind that we shall not see Spain this journey. It is a great joy to me that I have placed my feather bed and other things of price with that worthy woman of Lyndhurst, who will now have the use of them. I have 13 arrows yet, and if one of them fly unfleshed, then, by the twang of string, I shall deserve my doom. First at him who flaunts my lady's silken frock. Clap in a clout, by God, though a hand's breadth lower than I had meant. Now for the rogue with the head upon his pike. Ha! To the inch, John. When my eye is true I am better at rovers than at long butts or hoyles. Good shoot for you also, John. The villain hath fallen into the fire. But I pray you, John, to loose gently, and not to pluck with the drawing hand, for it is a trick that hath marred many a fine bowman." Whilst the two archers were keeping up a brisk fire upon the mob beneath them, Du Guesclin and his lady were consulting with Sir Nigel upon their desperate situation. "'Tis a strange end for one who has seen so many stricken fields," said the French chieftain. "For me one death is as another, but it is the thought of my sweet lady which goes to my heart." "Nay, Bertrand, I fear it as little as you," said she. "Had I my dearest wish, it would be that we should go together." "Well answered, fair lady," cried Sir Nigel, "and very sure I am that my own sweet wife would have said the same. If the end be now come, I have a great good fortune in having lived in times when so much glory was to be won, and in knowing so many valiant gentlemen and knights. But why do you pluck at my sleeve, Alleyne?" "If it please you, my fair lord, there are in this corner 2 great tubes of iron, with many heavy balls, which may perchance be those bombards and shot of which I have heard." "By St. Ives! it is true," cried Sir Bertrand, striding across to the recess where the ungainly funnel shaped thick ribbed engines were standing. "Bombards they are, and of good size. We may shoot down upon them." "Shoot with them, quotha!" cried Aylward in high disdain, for pressing danger is the great leveller of classes. "How is a man to take aim with these fool's toys, and how can he hope to do scathe with them?" "I will show you," answered Sir Nigel, "for here is the great box of powder, and if you will raise it for me, John, I will show you how it may be used. Come hither, where the folk are thickest round the fire. Now, Aylward, crane thy neck and see what would have been deemed an old's wife tale when we first turned our faces to the wars. Throw back the lid, John, and drop the box into the fire." A deafening roar, a fluff of bluish light, and the great square tower rocked and trembled from its very foundations, swaying this way and that like a reed in the wind. Amazed and dizzy, the defenders, clutching at the cracking parapet for support, saw great stones, burning beams of wood, and mangled bodies hurtling past them through the air. When they staggered to their feet once more, the whole keep had settled down upon one side, so that they could scarce keep their footing upon the sloping platform. Gazing over the edge, they looked down upon the horrible destruction which had been caused by the explosion. For 40 yards round the portal the ground was black with writhing, screaming figures, who struggled up and hurled themselves down again, tossing this way and that, sightless, scorched, with fire bursting from their tattered clothing. Beyond this circle of death their comrades, bewildered and amazed, cowered away from this black tower and from these invincible men who were most to be dreaded when hope was furthest from their hearts. "A sally, Du Guesclin, a sally!" cried Sir Nigel. "By St. Paul! they are in two minds, and a bold rush may turn them." He drew his sword as he spoke and darted down the winding stairs, closely followed by his 4 comrades. Ere he was at the first floor, however, he threw up his arms and stopped. "Mon Dieu!" he said, "we are lost men." "What then?" cried those behind him. "The well hath fallen in, the stair is blocked, and the fire still rages below. By St. Paul, friends, we have fought a very honourable fight, and may say in all humbleness that we have done our devoir. But I think that we may now go back to the Lady Tiphaine and say our orisons, for we have played our parts in this world, and it is time that we made ready for another." The narrow pass was blocked by huge stones littered in wild confusion over each other, with the blue choking smoke reeking up through the crevices. The explosion had blown in the wall and cut off the only path by which they could descend. Pent in 100 feet from earth, with a furnace raging under them and a ravening multitude all around who thirsted for their blood, it seemed indeed as though no men had ever come through such peril with their lives. Slowly they made their way back to the summit, but as they came out upon it the Lady Tiphaine darted forward and caught her husband by the wrist. "Bertrand," said she, "hush and listen. I have heard the voices of men all singing together in a strange tongue." Breathless they stood and silent, but no sound came up to them save the roar of the flames and the clamor of their enemies. "It cannot be, lady," said Du Guesclin. "This night hath overwrought you, and your senses play you false. What men are there in this country who would sing in a strange tongue?" "Hola!" yelled Aylward, leaping suddenly into the air with waving hands and joyous face. "I thought I heard it ere we went down, and now I hear it again. We are saved, comrades. By these 10 finger bones, we are saved. It is the marching song of the White Company. Hush!" With upraised forefinger and slanting head he stood listening. Suddenly there came swelling up a deep voiced rollicking chorus from somewhere out of the darkness. Never did choice or dainty ditty of Provence or Languedoc sound more sweetly in the ears than did this rough tongued Saxon to the 6 who strained their ears from the blazing keep. "We'll drink all together to the gray goose feather and the land where the gray goose flew." "Ah, by my hilt!" shouted Aylward, "it is the dear old bow song of the Company. Here come 200 as tight lads as ever twirled a shaft over their thumb nails. Hark to the dogs! How lustily they sing!" Nearer and clearer, swelling up out of the night, came the gay marching lilt. What of the bow? The bow was made in England, of true wood, of yew wood, the wood of English bows. For men who are free love the old yew tree and the land where the yew tree grows. What of the men? The men were bred in England, the bowmen, the yeomen, the lads of dale and fell. Here's to you and to you, to the hearts that are true, and the land where the true hearts dwell. "They sing very joyfully," said Du Guesclin, "as though they were going to a festival." "It is their wont when there is work to be done." "By St. Paul!" quoth Sir Nigel, "it is in my mind that they come too late, for I cannot see how we are to come down from this tower." "They come, the hearts of gold!" cried Aylward. "See, they move out from the shadow. Now they cross the meadow. They are on the further side of the moat. Hola, mon camarade! Hola! Johnston, Eccles, Cook, Harwood, Bly! Would you see a fair lady and 2 gallant knights done foully to death?"
"Who's there?" shouted a deep voice from below. "Who is this who speaks with an English tongue?" "It is I, old lad. 'Tis Sam Aylward of the Company, and here is your captain, Sir Nigel Loring, and four others, all laid out to be grilled like an Easterling's herrings." "Curse me if I did not think that it was the style of speech of old Samkin Aylward," said the voice, amid a buzz from the ranks. "Wherever there are knocks going there is Sammy in the heart of it. But who are these ill faced rogues who block the path?" "To your kennels, canaille." "What, you dare look us in the eyes? Out swords, lads! Give them the flat of them. Waste not your shafts upon such renegade knaves." There was little fight left in the peasants, however, still dazed by the explosion, amazed at their own losses, and disheartened by the arrival of the disciplined archers. In a very few minutes they were in full flight for their brushwood homes, leaving the morning sun to rise upon a blackened and blood stained ruin, where it had left the night before the magnificent castle of the Seneschal of Auvergne. Already the white lines in the east were deepening into pink, as the archers gathered round the keep and took counsel how to rescue the survivors. "Had we a rope," said Alleyne, "there is one side which is not yet on fire, down which we might slip." "But how to get a rope?" "It is an old trick," quoth Aylward. "Hola, Johnston, cast me up a rope, even as you did at Maupertuis in the war time." The grizzled archer thus addressed took several lengths of rope from his comrades, and knotting them firmly together he stretched them out in the long shadow which the rising sun threw from the frowning keep. Then he fixed the yew stave of his bow upon end, and measured the long thin black line which it threw upon the turf. "A 6-foot stave throws a 12-foot shadow," he muttered. "The keep throws a shadow of 60 paces. 30 paces of rope will be enough and to spare. Another strand, Watkin. Now pull at the end so that all may be safe. So, it is ready for them." "But how are they to reach it?" asked the young archer beside him. "Watch and see, young fool's head," growled the old bowman. He took a long string from his pouch and fastened one end to an arrow. "All ready, Samkin?" "Ready, camarade." "Close to your hand, then." With an easy pull he sent the shaft flickering gently up, falling upon the stonework within a foot of where Aylward was standing. The other end was secured to the rope, so that in a minute a good strong cord was dangling from the only sound side of the blazing and shattered tower. The Lady Tiphaine was lowered with a noose drawn fast under the arms, and the other 5 slid swiftly down amid the cheers and joyous outcry of their rescuers. Chapter 31. Chapter 32 of the White Company. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Clive Catterall. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 32. How the company took counsel round the fallen tree. "Where is Sir Claude Latour?" asked Sir Nigel, as his feet touched ground. "He is in camp near Montpezat, 2 hours' march from here, my fair lord," said Johnston, the grizzled bowman who commanded the archers. "Then we shall march thither, for I would fain have you all back at Dax in time to be in the prince's vanguard." "My lord," cried Alleyne joyfully, "here are our chargers in the field, and I see your harness amid the plunder which these rogues have left behind them." "By St. Ives, you speak sooth, young squire," said Du Guesclin. "There is my horse and my lady's jennet. The knaves led them from the stables, but fled without them. Now, Nigel, it is great joy to me to have seen one of whom I have often heard, yet we must leave you now, for I must be with the King of Spain ere your army crosses the mountains." "I had thought that you were in Spain with the valiant Henry of Trastamare." "I have been there, but I came back to France to raise succor for him. I shall ride back, Nigel, with 4,000 of the best lances of France at my back, so that your prince may find he hath a task which is worthy of him. God be with you, friend, and may we meet again in better times." "I do not think," said Sir Nigel,
as he stood by Alleyne's side, looking after the French knight and his lady, "that in all Christendom you will meet with a more stout hearted man or a fairer and sweeter dame. But your face is pale and sad, Alleyne. Have you perchance met with some hurt during the ruffle?" "Nay, my fair lord, I was but thinking of my friend Ford, and how he sat upon my couch no later than yesternight." Sir Nigel shook his head sadly. "Two brave squires have I lost," said he. "I know not why the young shoots should be plucked and an old weed left standing, yet certes there must be some good reason, since God hath so planned it. Did you not note, Alleyne, that the Lady Tiphaine did give us warning last night that danger was coming upon us?" "She did, my lord." "By St. Paul! my mind misgives me as to what she saw at Twynham Castle. And yet I cannot think that any Scottish or French rovers could land in such force as to beleaguer the fortalice. Call the company together, Aylward, and let us on, for it will be shame to us if we are not at Dax upon the trysting day." The archers had spread themselves over the ruins, but a blast upon a bugle brought them all back to muster, with such booty as they could bear with them stuffed into their pouches or slung over their shoulders. As they formed into ranks, each man dropping silently into his place, Sir Nigel ran a questioning eye over them, and a smile of pleasure played over his face. Tall and sinewy and brown, clear eyed, hard featured, with the stern and prompt bearing of experienced soldiers, it would be hard indeed for a leader to seek for a choicer following. Here and there in the ranks were old soldiers of the French wars, grizzled and lean, with fierce puckered features and shaggy bristling brows. The most, however, were young and dandy archers, with fresh English faces, their beards combed out, their hair curling from under their close steel hufkins, with gold or jewelled earrings gleaming in their ears, while their gold spangled baldricks, their silken belts, and the chains which many of them wore round their thick brown necks, all spoke of the brave times which they had had as free companions. Each had a yew or hazel stave slung over his shoulder. Plain and serviceable were the older men, but gaudily painted and carved at either end with the others. Steel caps, mail brigadines, white surcoats with a red lion of St. George, and sword or battle axe swinging from their belts completed this equipment, while in some cases the murderous maul or 5-foot mallet was hung across the bowstave, being fastened to their leathern shoulder belt by a hook in the centre of the handle. Sir Nigel's heart beat high as he looked upon their free bearing and fearless faces. For 2 hours they marched through forest and marshland along the left bank of the river Aveyron, Sir Nigel riding behind his company, with Alleyne at his right hand, and Johnston, the old master bowman, walking by his left stirrup. Ere they had reached their journey's end, the knight had learned all that he would know of his men, their doings and their intentions. Once, as they marched, they saw upon the further bank of the river a body of French men at arms, riding very swiftly in the direction of Villefranche. "It is the Seneschal of Toulouse with his following," said Johnston, shading his eyes with his hand. "Had he been on this side of the water he might have attempted something upon us." "I think that it would be well that we should cross," said Sir Nigel. "It were pity to balk this worthy seneschal should he desire to try some small feat of arms." "Nay, there is no ford nearer than Tourville," answered the old archer. "He is on his way to Villefranche, and short will be the shrift of any Jacks who come into his hands, for he is a man of short speech. It was he and the Seneschal of Beauclair who hung Peter Wilkins of the Company last Lammastide, for which, by the black rood of Waltham, they shall hang themselves if ever they come into our power. But here are our comrades, Sir Nigel, and here is our camp." As he spoke, the forest pathway along which they marched opened out into a green glade which sloped down towards the river. High leafless trees girt it in on 3 sides, with a thick undergrowth of holly between their trunks. At the farther end of this forest clearing there stood 40 or 50 huts, built very neatly from wood and clay, with the blue smoke curling out from the roofs. A dozen tethered horses and mules grazed around the encampment, while a number of archers lounged about, some shooting at marks, while others built up great wooden fires in the open and hung their cooking kettles above them. At the sight of their returning comrades there was a shout of welcome, and a horseman, who had been exercising his charger behind the camp, came cantering down to them. He was a dapper, brisk man, very richly clad, with a round, clean shaven face and very bright black eyes, which danced and sparkled with excitement. "Sir Nigel!" he cried. "Sir Nigel Loring at last! By my soul, we have waited you this month past. Right welcome, Sir Nigel. You have had my letter?" "It was that which brought me here," said Sir Nigel. "But indeed, Sir Claude Latour, it is a great wonder to me that you did not yourself lead these bowmen, for surely they could have found no better leader." "None, none, by the Virgin of L'Esparre!" he cried, speaking in the strange, thick Gascon speech which turns every V into a B. "But you know what these islanders of yours are, Sir Nigel. They will not be led by any save their own blood and race. There is no persuading them. Not even I, Claude Latour, Seigneur of Montchateau, master of the high justice, the middle, and the low, could gain their favor. They must needs hold a council and put their 200 thick heads together, and then there comes this fellow Aylward and another as their spokesman, to say that they will disband unless an Englishman of good name be set over them. There are many of them, as I understand, who come from some great forest which lies in Hampy or Hampty. I cannot lay my tongue to the name. Your dwelling is in those parts, and so their thoughts turn to you as their leader. But we had hoped that you would bring 100 men with you." "They are already at Dax, where we shall join them," said Sir Nigel. "But let the men break their fast, and we shall then take counsel what to do." "Come into my hut," said Sir Claude. "It is but poor fare that I can lay before you milk, cheese, wine, and bacon. Yet your squire and yourself will doubtless excuse it. This is my house, where the pennon flies before the door, a small residence to contain the Lord of Montchateau." Sir Nigel sat silent and distraught at his meal, while Alleyne hearkened to the clattering tongue of the Gascon, and to his talk of the glories of his own estate, his successes in love, and his triumphs in war. "And now that you are here, Sir Nigel," he said at last, "I have many fine ventures all ready for us. I have heard that Montpezat is of no great strength, and that there are 200,000 crowns in the castle. At Castelnau also there is a cobbler who is in my pay, and will throw us a rope any dark night from his house by the town wall. I promise you that you shall thrust your alms elbow deep among good silver pieces ere the nights are moonless again, for on every hand of us are fair women, rich wine, and good plunder, as much as heart could wish." "I have other plans," answered Sir Nigel curtly, "for I have come hither to lead these bowmen to the help of the prince, our master, who may have sore need of them ere he set Pedro up upon the throne of Spain. It is my purpose to start this very day for Dax upon the Adour, where he hath now pitched his camp." The face of the Gascon darkened, and his eyes flashed with resentment. "For me," he said, "I care little for this war, and I find the life which I lead a very joyous and pleasant one. I will not go to Dax." "Nay, think again, Sir Claude," said Sir Nigel gently, "for you have ever had the name of a true and loyal knight. Surely you will not hold back now when your master hath need of you." "I will not go to Dax," the other shouted. "But your devoir, your oath of fealty?" "I say that I will not go." "Then, Sir Claude, I must lead the company without you." "If they will follow," cried the Gascon with a sneer. "These are not hired slaves, but free companions, who will do nothing save by their own good wills. In very sooth, my Lord Loring, they are ill men to trifle with, and it were easier to pluck a bone from a hungry bear than to lead bowmen out of a land of plenty and of pleasure." "Then I pray you to gather them together," said Sir Nigel, "and I will tell them what is in my mind. For if I am their leader they must to Dax, and if I am not, then I know not what I am doing in Auvergne. Have my horse ready, Alleyne, for by St. Paul, come what may, I must be upon the homeward road ere midday." A blast upon the bugle summoned the bowmen to council, and they gathered in little knots and groups around a great fallen tree which lay athwart the glade. Sir Nigel sprang lightly upon the trunk, and stood with blinking eye and firm lips looking down at the ring of upturned warlike faces. "They tell me, bowman," said he, "that ye have grown so fond of ease and plunder and high living that ye are not to be moved from this pleasant country. But, by St. Paul! I will believe no such thing of you, for I can readily see that you are all very valiant men, who would scorn to live here in peace when your prince hath so great a venture before him. Ye have chosen me as a leader, and a leader I will be if ye come with me to Spain, and I vow to you that my pennon of the 5 roses shall, if God give me strength and life, be ever where there is most honor to be gained. But if it be your wish to loll and loiter in these glades, bartering glory and renown for vile gold and ill gotten riches, then ye must find another leader, for I have lived in honor, and in honor I trust that I shall die. If there be forest men or Hampshire men amongst ye, I call upon them to say whether they will follow the banner of Loring." "Here's a Romsey man for you," cried a young bowman with a sprig of evergreen set in his helmet. "And a lad from Alresford," shouted another. "And from Milton." "And from Burley." "And from Lymington." "And a little one from Brockenhurst," shouted a huge limbed fellow who sprawled beneath a tree. "By my hilt, lads," cried Aylward, jumping upon a fallen trunk, "I think that we could not look the girls in the eyes if we let the prince cross the mountains and did not pull string to clear a path for him. It is very well in times of peace to lead such a life as we have had together, but now the war banner is in the wind once more, and by these 10 finger bones, if you go alone, old Samkin Aylward will walk beside it." These words from a man as popular as Aylward decided many of the waverers, and a shout of approval burst from his audience. "Far be it from me," said Sir Claude Latour suavely, "to persuade you against this worthy archer, or against Sir Nigel Loring. Yet we have been together in many ventures, and perchance it may not be amiss if I say to you what I think upon the matter." "Peace for the little Gascon!" cried the archers. "Let every man have his word. Shoot straight for the mark, lad, and fair play for all." "Bethink you, then," said Sir Claude, "that you go under a hard rule, with neither freedom nor pleasure, and for what? For 6 a day at the most, while now you may walk across the country and stretch out either hand to gather in whatever you have mind for. What do we not hear of our comrades who have gone with Sir John Hawkwood to Italy? In one night they have held to ransom 600 of the richest noblemen of Mantua. They camp before a great city, and the base burghers come forth with the keys, and then they make great spoil, or, if it please them better, they take so many horseloads of silver as a composition. And so they journey on from state to state, rich and free, and feared by all. Now, is not that the proper life for a soldier?" "The proper life for a robber," roared Hordle John in his thundering voice. "And yet there is much in what the Gascon says," said a swarthy fellow in a weather stained doublet, "and I for one would rather prosper in Italy than starve in Spain." "You were always a cur and a traitor, Mark Shaw," cried Aylward. "By my hilt, if you will stand forth and draw your sword, I will warrant you that you will see neither one nor the other." "Nay, Aylward," said Sir Nigel, "we cannot mend the matter by broiling. Sir Claude, I think that what you have said does you little honor, and if my words aggrieve you I am ever ready to go deeper into the matter with you. But you shall have such men as will follow you, and you may go where you will, so that you come not with us. Let all who love their prince and country stand fast, while those who think more of a well lined purse step forth upon the farther side." 13 bowmen with hung heads and sheepish faces stepped forward with Mark Shaw, and ranged themselves behind Sir Claude. Amid the hootings and hissings of their comrades they marched off together to the Gascon's hut, while the main body broke up their meeting and set cheerily to work packing their possessions, furbishing their weapons, and preparing for the march which lay before them. Over the Tarn and the Garonne, through the vast quagmires of Armagnac, past the swift flowing Losse, and so down the long valley of the Adour, there was many a long league to be crossed ere they could join themselves to that dark war cloud which was drifting slowly southwards to the line of the snowy peaks beyond which the banner of England had never yet been seen. Chapter 33. Chapter 33 of the White Company.
This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Clive Catterall. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 33. How the army made the passage of Roncesvalles. The whole vast plain of Gascony and of Languedoc is an arid and profitless expanse in winter, save where the swift flowing Adour and her snow fed tributaries, the Louts, the Oloron, and the Pau, run down to the Sea of Biscay. South of the Adour, the jagged line of mountains which fringe the skyline send out long granite claws, running down into the lowlands and dividing them into gaves, or stretches of valley. Hillocks grow into hills, and hills into mountains, each range overlying its neighbour, until they soar up in the giant chain which raises its spotless and untrodden peaks, white and dazzling against the pale blue wintry sky. A quiet land is this, a land where the slow moving Basque, with his flat biretta cap, his red sash, and his hempen sandals, tills his scanty farm or drives his lean flock to their hillside pastures. It is the country of the wolf and the isard, of the brown bear and the mountain goat, a land of bare rock and of rushing water. Yet here it was that the will of a great prince had now assembled a gallant army, so that from the Adour to the passes of Navarre the barren valleys and windswept wastes were populous with soldiers, and loud with the shouting of orders and the neighing of horses. For the banners of war had been flung to the wind once more, and over those glistening peaks was the highway along which honour pointed in an age when men had chosen her as their guide. And now all was ready for the enterprise. From Dax to Saint Jean Pied du Port the country was mottled with the white tents of Gascon, Aquitanians, and English, all eager for the advance. From all sides the free companions had trooped in, until not less than 12,000 of these veteran troops were cantoned along the frontiers of Navarre. From England had arrived the prince's brother, the Duke of Lancaster, with 400 knights in his train and a strong company of archers. Above all, an heir to the throne had been born in Bordeaux, and the prince might leave his spouse with an easy mind, for all was well with mother and with child. The keys of the mountain passes still lay in the hands of the shifty and ignoble Charles of Navarre, who had chaffered and bargained both with the English and with the Spanish, taking money from the one side to hold them open, and from the other to keep them sealed. The mallet hand of Edward, however, had shattered all the schemes and wiles of the plotter. Neither entreaty nor courtly remonstrance came from the English prince, but Sir Hugh Calverley passed silently over the border with his company, and the blazing walls of the two cities of Miranda and Puente de la Rey warned the unfaithful monarch that there were other metals besides gold, and that he was dealing with a man to whom it was unsafe to lie. His price was paid, his objections silenced, and the mountain gorges lay open to the invaders. From the feast of the Epiphany there was mustering and massing, until in the first week of February, 3 days after the White Company joined the army, the word was given for a general advance through the defile of Roncesvalles. At 5 in the cold winter's morning the bugles were blowing in the hamlet of Saint Jean Pied du Port, and by 6 Sir Nigel's company, 300 strong, were on their way for the defile, pushing swiftly in the dim light up the steep curving road, for it was the prince's order that they should be the first to pass through, and that they should remain on guard at the further end until the whole army had emerged from the mountains. Day was already breaking in the east, and the summits of the great peaks had turned rosy red, while the valleys still lay in the shadow, when they found themselves with the cliffs on either hand and the long rugged pass stretching away before them. Sir Nigel rode his great black war horse at the head of his archers, dressed in full armor, with Black Simon bearing his banner behind him, while Alleyne, at his bridle arm, carried his blazoned shield and his well steeled ashen spear. A proud and happy man was the knight,
and many a time he turned in his saddle to look at the long column of bowmen who swung swiftly along behind him.
"By St. Paul, Alleyne," said he, "this pass is a very perilous place, and I would that the King of Navarre had held it against us, for it would have been a very honourable venture had it fallen to us to win the passage. I have heard the minstrels sing of one Sir Roland who was slain by the infidels in these very parts."
"If it please you, my fair lord," said Black Simon, "I know something of these parts, for I have twice served a term with the King of Navarre. There is a hospice of monks yonder, where you may see the roof among the trees, and there it was that Sir Roland was slain. The village upon the left is Aubasieta, and I know a house therein where the right wine of Jurançon is to be brought, if it would please you to quaff a morning cup."
"There is smoke yonder upon the right."
"That is the village named Les Adoudes, and I know a hostel there also where the wine is of the best. It is said that the innkeeper hath a buried treasure, and I doubt not, my fair lord, that if you grant me leave I could prevail upon him to tell us where he hath hid it."
"Nay, nay, Simon," said Sir Nigel curtly, "I pray you to forget these free companion tricks. Ha, Edricson, I see that you stare about you, and in good sooth these mountains must seem wondrous indeed to one who hath but seen Butser or the Portsdown Hill." The broken and rugged road had wound along the crests of low hills, with wooded ridges on either side of it over which peeped the loftier mountains, the distant peak of the south, and the vast Altabisca, which towered high above them and cast its black shadow from left to right across the valley. From where they now stood they could look forward down a long vista of beech woods and jagged rock strewn wilderness, all white with snow, to where the pass opened out upon the uplands beyond. Behind them they could still catch a glimpse of the gray plains of Gascony, and could see her rivers gleaming like coils of silver in the sunshine. As far as eye could see, from among the rocky gorges and the bristles of the pine woods, there came the quick twinkle and glitter of steel, while the wind brought with it sudden distant bursts of martial music from the great host which rolled by every road and bypath towards the narrow pass of Roncesvalles. On the cliffs on either side might also be seen the flash of arms and the waving of pennons, where the force of Navarre looked down upon the army of strangers who passed through their territories. "By St. Paul," said Sir Nigel, blinking up at them, "I think that we may have much to hope for from these cavaliers, for they cluster very thickly upon our flanks. Pass word to the men, Aylward, that they unsling their bows, for I have no doubt that there are some very worthy gentlemen yonder who may give us some opportunity for honourable advancement." "I hear that the prince hath the King of Navarre as hostage," said Alleyne, "and it is said that he hath sworn to put him to death if there be any attack upon us." "It was not so that war was made when good King Edward first turned his hand to it," said Sir Nigel sadly. "Ah, Alleyne, I fear that you will never live to see such things, for the minds of men are more set upon money and gain than of old. By St. Paul, it was a noble sight when two great armies would draw together upon a certain day, and all who had a vow would ride forth to discharge themselves of it. What noble spear runnings have I not seen, and even in a humble way taken part in, when cavaliers would run a course for the easing of their souls and for the love of their ladies. Never a bad word have I for the French, for, though I have ridden 20 times up to their array, I have never yet failed to find some very gentle and worthy knight or squire who was willing to do what he might to enable me to attempt some small feat of arms. Then, when all cavaliers had been satisfied, the two armies would come to hand strokes, and fight right merrily until one or other had the vantage. By St. Paul, it was not our wont in those days to pay gold for the opening of passes, nor would we hold a king as hostage lest his people come to thrusts with us. In good sooth, if the war is to be carried out in such a fashion, then it is grief to me that I ever came away from Castle Twynham, for I would not have left my sweet lady had I not thought that there were deeds of arms to be done." "But surely, my fair lord," said Alleyne, "you have done some great feats of arms since we left the Lady Loring." "I cannot call any to mind," answered Sir Nigel. "There was the taking of the sea rovers, and the holding of the keep against the Jacks."
"Nay, nay," said the knight.
"These were not feats of arms, but mere wayside ventures and the chances of travel. By St. Paul! if it were not that these hills are over steep for Pommers, I would ride to these cavaliers of Navarre and see if there were not some among them who would help me to take this patch from mine eye. It is a sad sight to see this very fine pass, which mine own company here could hold against an army, and yet to ride through it with as little profit as though it were the lane from my kennels to the Avon." All morning Sir Nigel rode in a very ill humor, with his company tramping behind him. It was a toilsome march over broken ground and through snow which came often as high as the knee, yet ere the sun had begun to sink they had reached the spot where the gorge opens out on to the uplands of Navarre, and could see the towers of Pampeluna jutting up against the southern sky line. Here the company were quartered in a scattered mountain hamlet, and Alleyne spent the day looking down upon the swarming army which poured with gleam of spears and flaunt of standards through the narrow pass.
"Hold up, mon gar," said Aylward, seating himself upon a boulder by his side. "This is indeed a fine sight upon which it is good to look, and a man might go far ere he would see so many brave men and fine horses. By my hilt! our little lord is wroth because we have come peacefully through the passes, but I will warrant him that we have fighting enow ere we turn our faces northward again. It is said that there are 80,000 men behind the King of Spain, with Du Guesclin and all the best lances of France, who have sworn to shed their heart's blood ere this Pedro come again to the throne."
"Yet our own army is a great one," said Alleyne.
"Nay, there are but 27,000 men. Chandos hath persuaded the prince to leave many behind, and indeed I think that he is right, for there is little food and less water in these parts for which we are bound. A man without his meat, or a horse without his fodder, is like a wet bowstring, fit for little. But voila, mon petit, here comes Chandos with his company, and there is many a pencil and banderole among yonder squadrons, which show that the best blood of England is riding under his banners."
Whilst Aylward had been speaking, a strong column of archers had defiled through the pass beneath them. They were followed by a banner bearer, who held high the scarlet wedge upon a silver field, which proclaimed the presence of the famous warrior. He rode himself within a spear's length of his standard, clad from neck to foot in steel, but draped in the long linen gowl or parement which was destined to be the cause of his death. His plumed helmet was carried behind him by his body squire, and his head was covered by a small purple cap, from under which his snow white hair curled downwards to his shoulders. With his long beak like nose and his single gleaming eye, which shone brightly from under a thick tuft of grizzled brow, he seemed to Alleyne to have something of the look of some fierce old bird of prey. For a moment he smiled as his eye lit upon the banner of the 5 roses waving from the hamlet, but his course lay for Pampeluna, and he rode on after the archers. Close at his heels came 16 squires, all chosen from the highest families, and behind them rode 1,200 English knights, with gleam of steel and tossing of plumes, their harness jingling, their long straight swords clanking against their stirrup irons, and a beat of their chargers' hoofs like the low deep roar of the sea upon the shore. Behind them marched 600 Cheshire and Lancashire archers bearing the badge of the Audleys, followed by the famous Lord Audley himself, with the 4 valiant squires, Dutton of Dutton, Delves of Doddington, Foulhurst of Crewe, and Hawkstone of Wain Hill, who had all won such glory at Poitiers. 200 heavily armed cavalry rode behind the Audley standard, while close at their heels came the Duke of Lancaster with glittering train, heralds tabarded with the royal arms riding 3 deep upon cream colored chargers in front of him. On either side of the young prince rode the 2 seneschals of Aquitaine, Sir Guiscard d'Angle and Sir Stephen Cossington, the one bearing the banner of the province and the other that of St. George. Away behind him, as far as I could reach, rolled the far stretching unbroken river of steel, rank after rank and column after column, with waving of plumes, glitter of arms, tossing of guidons,
and flash and flutter of countless armorial devices. All day Alleyne looked down upon the changing scene, and all day the old bowman stood by his elbow, pointing out the crests of famous warriors and the arms of noble houses. Here were the gold mullets of the Packingtons, the sable and ermine of the Mackworths, the scarlet bars of the Wakes, the gold and blue of the Grosvenors, the cinquefoil of the Cliftons, the annulets of the Musgraves, the silver pinions of the Beauchamps, the crosses of the Molyneux, the bloody chevron of the Woodhouses, the red and silver of the Worsleys, the swords of the Clarks, the boar's heads of the Lucys, the crescents of the Boyntons, and the wolf and dagger of the Lipscombs. So through the sunny winter day the chivalry of England poured down through the dark pass of Roncesvalles to the plains of Spain. It was on a Monday that the Duke of Lancaster's division passed safely through the Pyrenees. On the Tuesday there was a bitter frost, and the ground rung like iron beneath the feet of the horses. Yet ere evening the prince himself, with the main battle of his army, had passed the gorge and united with his vanguard at Pampeluna. With him rode the King of Majorca, the hostage King of Navarre, and the fierce Don Pedro of Spain, whose pale blue eyes gleamed with a sinister light as they rested once more upon the distant peaks of the land which had disowned him. Under the royal banners rode many a bold Gascon baron and many a hot-blooded islander. Here were the high stewards of Aquitaine, of Saintonge, of La Rochelle, of Quercy, of Limousin, of Agenois, of Pitou, and of Bigorre, with the banners and musters of their provinces. Here also were the valiant Earl of Angus, Sir Thomas Banister, with his garter over his greave, Sir Neil Loring, the second cousin to Sir Nigel, and a long column of Welsh footmen who marched under the red banner of Merlin. From dawn to sundown the long train wound through the pass, their breath reeking up upon the frosty air like the steam from a cauldron. The weather was less keen upon the Wednesday, and the rear guard made good their passage, with the bombards and the waggon train. Free companions and Gascons made up this portion of the army, to the number of 10,000 men. The fierce Sir Hugh Calverley, with his yellow mane, and the rugged Sir Robert Knolles, with their war hardened and veteran companies of English bowmen, headed the long column, while behind them came the turbulent bands of the Bastard of Breteuil, Nandon de Bageron, One eyed Camus, Black Ortinho, La Nuit, and others whose very names seemed to smack of hard hands and ruthless deeds. With them also were the pick of the Gascon chivalry, the old Duc d'Armagnac, his nephew Lord d'Albret, brooding and scowling over his wrongs, the giant Oliver de Clisson, the Captal de Buch, pink of knighthood, the sprightly Sir Perdugas d'Albret, the red bearded Lord d'Espard, and a long train of needy and grasping border nobles, with long pedigrees and short purses, who had come down from their hillside strongholds, all hungering for the spoils and the ransoms of Spain. By the Thursday morning the whole army was encamped in the vale of Pampeluna, and the prince had called his council to meet him in the old palace of the ancient city of Navarre. End of chapter 33. Chapter 34 of the White Company. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Recording by Clive Catterall. The White Company by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Chapter 34. How the company made sport in the vale of Pampeluna. Whilst the council was sitting in Pampeluna, the White Company, having encamped in a neighbouring valley close to the companies of La Nuit and of Black Ortinho, were amusing themselves with sword play, wrestling, and shooting at the shields which they had placed upon the hillside to serve them as butts. The younger archers, with their coats of mail thrown aside, their brown or flaxen hair tossing in the wind,
and the jerkins turned back to give free play to their brawny chests and arms, stood in lines, each loosing his shaft in turn, while Johnston, Aylward, Black Simon, and half a score of the elders lounged up and down with critical eyes and a word of rough praise or of curt censure for the marksman. Behind stood knots of Gascon and Brabant crossbowmen from the companies of Ortingo and of La Nuit, leaning upon their unsightly weapons and watching the practice of the Englishmen. "A good shot, Hewett, a good shot," said old Johnston to a young bowman who stood with his bow in his left hand, gazing with parted lips after his flying shaft. "You see, she finds the ring, as I knew she would from the moment that your string twanged." "Loose it easy, steady and yet sharp," said Aylward. "By my hilt, mon gar, it is very well when you do but shoot at a shield, but when there is a man behind the shield, and he rides at you with wave of sword and glint of eyes from behind his visor, you may find him a less easy mark." "It is a mark that I have found before now," answered the young bowman.
"And shall again, camarade, I doubt not. But hola, Johnston, who is this who holds his bow like a crow keeper?"
"'Tis Silas Peterson of Horsham. Do not
Wink with one eye and look with the other, Silas,
and do not hop and dance after you shoot with your tongue out,
for that will not speed it upon its way. Stand straight and firm as God made you.
Oh, move not the bow arm, and steady with the drawing hand." "I' faith," said Black Simon, "I am a spearman myself, and am more fitted for hand strokes than for such work as this. Yet I have spent my days among bowmen, and I have seen many a brave shaft sped. I will not say but that we have some good marksmen here, and that this company would be accounted a fine body of archers at any time or place. Yet I do not see any man who bend so strong a bow or shoot as true a shaft as those whom I have known."
"You say sooth," said Johnston, turning his seamed and grizzled face upon the man at arms. "See yonder," he added, pointing to a bombard which lay within the camp. "There is what hath done scathe to good bowmanship, with its filthy soot and foolish roaring mouth. I wonder that a true knight, like our prince, should carry such a scurvy thing in his train. Robin, thou red headed lurden, how oft must I tell thee not to shoot straight with a quarter wind blowing across the mark? By these 10 finger bones, there were some fine bowmen at the intaking of Calais," said Aylward. "I well remember that on occasion of an outfall a Genoan raised his arm over his mantlet and shook it at us 100 paces from our line. There were 20 who loosed shafts at him. When the man was afterwards slain, it was found that he had taken 18 through his forearm."
"And I can call to mind," remarked Johnston, "that when the great cog Christopher, which the French had taken from us, was moored 200 paces from the shore, 2 archers, little Robin Withstaff and Elias Baddlesmere, in 4 shots each cut every strand of her hempen anchor cord, so that she well nigh came upon the rocks." "Good shooting, i' faith, rare shooting," said Black Simon. "But I have seen you, Johnston, and you, Samkin Aylward, and 1 or 2 others who are still with us, shoot as well as the best. Was it not you, Johnston, who took the fat ox at Finsbury Butts against the pick of London town?" A sunburnt and black eyed Brabanter had stood near the old archers, leaning upon a large crossbow and listening to their talk, which had been carried on in that hybrid camp dialect which both nations could understand. He was a squat, bull necked man, clad in the iron helmet, mail tunic, and woollen gambeson of his class. A jacket with hanging sleeves slashed with velvet at the neck and wrists showed that he was a man of some consideration, an under officer or file leader of his company. "I cannot think," said he, "why you English should be so fond of your 6-foot stick. If it amuse you to bend it, well and good, but why should I strain and pull when my little moulinet will do all for me, and better than I can do it for myself?"
"I have seen good shooting with a prod and with a latch," said Aylward; "but by my hilt, camarade, with all respect to you and your bow, I think that it is but a woman's weapon which a woman can point and loose as easily as a man."
"I know not about that," answered the Brabanter; "but this I know, that I have served for 14 years, I have never yet seen an Englishman do aught with a longbow which I could not do better with my arbalest. By the three kings, I would even go further and say that I have done things with my arbalest which no Englishman could do with his longbow."
"Well said, mon gar," cried Aylward. "A good cock has ever a brave call. Now, I have shot little of late, but there is Johnston here who will try a round with you for the honor of the Company."
"And I will lay a gallon of Jurancon wine upon the longbow," said Black Simon, "though I had rather for my own drinking that it were a quart of Twynham ale." "I take both your challenge and your wager," said the man of Brabant, throwing off his jacket and glancing keenly about him with his black twinkling eyes. "I cannot see any fitting mark, for I care not to waste a bolt upon these shields, which a drunken boor could not miss at a village kermesse."
"This is a perilous man,"
whispered an English man at arms, plucking at Aylward's sleeve.
"He is the best marksman of all the crossbow companies, and it was he who brought down the Constable of Bourbon at Brignais. I fear that your man will come by little honor with him." "Yet I have seen Johnston shoot these 20 years, and I will not flinch from it. How say you, old war hound? Will you not have a flight shot or two with this springald?"
"Tut, tut, Aylward," said the old bowman. "My day is past, and it is for the younger ones to hold what we have gained. I take it unkindly of thee, Samkin, that thou shouldst call all eyes thus upon a broken bowman who could once shoot a fair shaft. Let me feel that bow, Wilkins. It is a Scotch bow, I see, for the upper nock is without and the lower within. By the black rood, it is a good piece of yew, well nocked, well strung, well waxed, and very joyful to the feel. I think that even now that I might hit any large and goodly mark with a bow like this. Turn thy quiver to me, Aylward. I'll have an ash arrow pierced with cornel wood for a roving shaft."
"By my hilt, and so do I," cried Aylward. "These 3 gander wing shafts are such."
"So I see, comrade. It has been my wont to choose a saddle backed feather for a dead shaft, and a swine backed for a smooth flyer. I will take the 2 of them. Ah, Samkin, lad, the eye grows dim and the hand less firm as the years pass." "Come then, are you not ready?" said the Brabanter, who had watched with ill concealed impatience the slow and methodic movements of his antagonist. "I will venture a rover with you, or try long butts or hoyles," said old Johnston. "To my mind the longbow is a better weapon than the arbalest, but it may be ill for me to prove it." "So I think," quoth the other with a sneer. He drew his moulinet from his girdle, and fixing it to the windlass, he drew back the powerful double cord until it had clicked into the catch. Then from his quiver he drew a short thick quarrel, which he placed with the utmost care upon the groove. Word had spread of what was going forward, and the rivals were already surrounded, not only by the English archers of the Company, but by hundreds of arbalestiers and men at arms from the bands of Ortingo and La Nuit, to the latter of which the Brabanter belonged. "There is a mark yonder on the hill," said he. "Mayhap you can discern it."
"I see something," answered Johnston, shading his eyes with his hand, "but it is a very long shoot."
"A fair shoot, a fair shoot. Stand aside, Arnaud, lest you find a bolt through your gizzard. Now, comrade, I take no flight shot, and I give you the vantage of watching my shaft." As he spoke he raised his arbalest to his shoulder, and was about to pull the trigger when a large gray stork flapped heavily into view, skimming over the brow of the hill, and then soaring up into the air to pass the valley. Its shrill and piercing cries drew all eyes upon it, and as it came nearer, a dark spot which circled above it resolved itself into a peregrine falcon, which hovered over its head, poising itself from time to time, and watching its chance of closing with its clumsy quarry. Nearer and nearer came the 2 birds, all absorbed in their own contest, the stork wheeling upwards, the hawk still fluttering above it, until they were not 100 paces from the camp. The Brabanter raised his weapon to the sky, and there came the short deep twang of his powerful string. His bolt struck the stork just where its wing meets the body, and the bird whirled aloft in a last convulsive flutter before falling wounded and flapping to the earth. A roar of applause burst from the crossbowmen, but at the instant that the bolt struck its mark Old Johnston, who had stood listlessly with arrow on string, bent his bow and sped a shaft through the body of the falcon. Whipping the other from his belt, he sent it skimming some few feet from the earth with so true an aim that it struck and transfixed the stork for the second time ere it could reach the ground. A deep chested shout of delight burst from the archers at the sight of this double feat, and Aylward, dancing with joy, threw his arms round the old marksman and embraced him with such vigor that their mail tunics clanged again.
"Ah, comrade!" he cried, "you shall have a stoop with me for this. What then, old dog? Would not the hawk please thee, but thou must have the stork as well? Oh, to my heart again!"
"It is a pretty piece of yew, and well strung," said Johnston, with a twinkle in his deep set grey eyes. "Even an old broken bowman might find the clout with a bow like this." "You have done very well," remarked the Brabanter in a surly voice, "but it seems to me that you have not yet shown yourself to be a better marksman than I, for I have struck that at which I aimed, and by the three kings, no man can do more."
"It would ill beseem me to claim to be a better marksman," answered Johnston, "for I have heard great things of your skill. I did but wish to show that the longbow could do that which an arbalest could not do, for you could not, with your moulinet, have your string ready to speed another shaft ere the bird dropped to the earth."
"In that you have the vantage," said the crossbowman. "By St. James, it is now my turn to show you where my weapon has the better of you. I pray you to draw a flight shaft with all your strength down the valley, that we may see the length of your shoot."
"That is a very strong prod of yours," said Johnston, shaking his grizzled head as he glanced at the thick arch and powerful strings of his rival's arbalest. "I have little doubt that you can overshoot me, and yet I have seen bowmen who could send a cloth yard arrow further than you could speed a quarrel."
"So I have heard," remarked the Brabanter, "and yet it is a strange thing that these wondrous bowmen are never where I chance to be. Pace out the distances with a wand at every 5 score, and do you, Arnaud, stand at the 5th wand to carry back my bolts to me." A line was measured down the valley, and Johnston, drawing an arrow to the very head, sent it whistling over the row of wands.
"Bravely drawn! A rare shoot!" shouted the bystanders.
"It is well up to the 4th mark."
"By my hilt, it is over it!" cried Aylward. "I can see where they have stooped to gather up the shaft."
"We shall hear anon," said Johnston quietly, and presently a young archer came running to say that the arrow had fallen 20 paces beyond the 4th wand. "400 paces and a score!" cried Black Simon. "I' faith, it is a very long flight. Yet wood and steel may do more than flesh and blood." The Brabanter stepped forward with a smile of conscious triumph, and loosed the cord of his weapon. A shout burst from his comrades as they watched the swift and lofty flight of the heavy bolt.
"Over the 4th!" groaned Aylward. "By my hilt, I think that it is well up to the 5th."
"It is over the 5th!" cried a Gascon loudly, and a comrade came running with waving arms to say that the bolt had pitched 8 paces beyond the mark of the 500. "Which weapon hath the vantage now?" cried the Brabanter, strutting proudly about with shouldered arbalest amid the applause of his companions. "You can overshoot me," said Johnston gently. "Or any other man who ever bent a longbow," cried his victorious adversary.
"Nay, not so fast,"
said a huge archer, whose mighty shoulders and red head towered high above the throng of his comrades.
"I must have a word with you ere you crow so loudly. Where is my little popper? By Sainted Dick of Hampole, it will be a strange thing if I cannot outshoot that little thing of thine, which to mine eyes is more like a rat trap than a bow. Will you try another flight, or do you stand by your last?"
508 paces will serve my turn," answered the Brabanter, looking askance at this new opponent.
"Tut, John," whispered Aylward, "you never were a marksman. Why must you thrust your spoon into this dish?" "Easy and slow, Aylward. There are very many things which I cannot do, but there are also one or two which I have the trick of. It is in my mind that I can beat this shoot, if my bow will but hold together."
"Go on, old babe of the woods! Have at it, Hampshire!" cried the archers, laughing.
"By my soul, you may grin," cried John, "but I learned how to make the long shoot from old Hob Miller of Milford."
He took up a great black bow as he spoke, and sitting down upon the ground, he placed his 2 feet on either end of the stave. With an arrow fitted, he then pulled the string towards him with both hands until the head of the shaft was level with the wood. The great bow creaked and groaned, and the cord vibrated with the tension.
"Who is this fool who stands in the way of my shoot?" said he, craning up his neck from the ground.
"He stands on the further side of my mark," answered the Brabanter, "so he has little to fear from you."
"Well, the saints assoil him!" cried John, "though I think he is over near to be scathed."
As he spoke, he raised his 2 feet with the bow stave upon their soles, and his cord twanged with a deep rich hum which might be heard across the valley. Then the measurer in the distance fell flat upon his face, and then jumping up again, he began to run in the opposite direction. "Well shot, old lad! It is indeed over his head," cried the bowman.
"Mon Dieu!"
exclaimed the Brabanter. "Who ever saw such a shoot?"
"It is but a trick," quoth John. "Many a time have I won a gallon of ale by covering a mile in 3 flights down Wilverley Chase."
"It fell 130 paces beyond the 5th mark," shouted an archer in the distance. 630 paces! Mon Dieu, but that is a shoot! And yet it says nothing for your weapon, mon gros camarade, for it was by turning yourself into a crossbow that you did it."
"By my hilt, there is truth in that," cried Aylward. "And now, friend, I will myself show you a vantage of the longbow. I pray you to speed a bolt against yonder shield with all your force. It is an inch of elm with a bull's hide over it."
"I scarce shot as many shafts at Brignais," growled the man of Brabant, "though I found a better mark there than a cantle of bull's hide. But what is this, Englishman? The shield hangs not 100 paces from me, and a blind man could strike it." He screwed up his string to the furthest pitch and shot his quarrel at the dangling shield. Aylward, who had drawn an arrow from his quiver, carefully greased the head of it and sped it at the same mark.
"Run, Wilkins," quoth he, "and fetch me the shield."
Long were the faces of the Englishmen, and broad the laugh of the crossbowmen, as the heavy mantlet was carried towards them, for there in the centre was a thick Brabant bolt driven deeply into the wood, while there was neither sign nor trace of the cloth yard shaft. "By the 3 kings!" cried the Brabanter, "this time at least there is no gainsaying which is the better weapon, or which the truer hand that held it. You have missed the shield, Englishman."
Tarry a bit, mon gar,"
quoth Aylward, and turning round the shield he showed a round clear hole in the wood at the back of it.
"My shaft has passed through it, camarade, and I trow the one which goes through is more to be feared than the one which bides on the way."
The Brabanter stamped his foot with mortification, and was about to make some angry reply when Alleyn Edricson came riding up to the crowds of archers. "Sir Nigel will be here soon," said he, "and it is his wish to speak with the company." In an instant order and method took the place of general confusion. Bows, steel caps, and jacks were all caught up from the grass. A long cordon cleared the camp of all strangers, while the main body fell into 4 lines, with under officers and file leaders in front and on either flank. So they stood silent and motionless when their leader came riding towards them, his face shining and his whole small figure swelling with the news which he bore. "Great honor has been done to us, men," cried he, "for of all the army the prince has chosen us out that we should ride onwards into the lands of Spain to spy on our enemies. Yet, as there are many of us, and as the service may not be to the liking of all, I pray that those will step forward from the ranks who have the will to follow me." There was a rustle among the bowmen. When Sir Nigel looked up at them, no man stood forward from his fellows, but the 4 lines of men stretched unbroken as before. Sir Nigel blinked at them in amazement, and a look of deepest sorrow shadowed his face. "That I should live to see the day!" he cried. "What, not one?" "My fair lord," whispered Alleyne, "they have all stepped forward." "Ah, by St. Paul! I see how it is with them. I could not think that they would desert me. We start at dawn to morrow, and ye are to have the horses of Sir Robert Cheney's company. Be ready, I pray thee, at early cockcrow." A buzz of delight burst from the archers as they broke their ranks and ran hither and thither, whooping and cheering like boys who have news of a holiday. Sir Nigel gazed after them with a smiling face, when a heavy hand fell upon his shoulder.
"What ho, my knight errant of Twynham!" said a voice. "You are off to Ebro, I hear, and by the holy fish of Tobias you must take me under your banner." "What, Sir Oliver Buttesthorn!" cried Sir Nigel. "I had heard that you were come into camp, and had hoped to see you. Glad and proud shall I be to have you with me." "I have a most particular and weighty reason for wishing to go," said the sturdy knight. "I can well believe it," returned Sir Nigel. "I have met no man who is quicker to follow where honor leads." "Nay, it is not for honor that I go, Nigel."
"For what then?"
"For pullets."
"Pullets?"
"Yes, for the rascal vanguard had cleared every hen from the countryside. It was this very morning that Norbury, my squire, lamed his horse in riding round in quest for one, for we have a bag of truffles, and nought to eat with them. Never have I seen such locusts as this vanguard of ours. Not a pullet shall we see until we are in front of them. So I shall leave my Winchester renegades to the care of the provost marshal, and I shall hie south with you, Nigel, with my truffles at my saddle bow."
"Oliver, Oliver, I know you over well," said Sir Nigel, shaking his head, and the two old soldiers rode off together to their pavilion. CHAPTER 34.